ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome. My name is Steven Risotto. I cover the San Francisco Giants for SFA, and I'm the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest minds around the game of baseball. This episode was recorded from inside the podcast studio inside the Golden Gate Express newsroom at San Francisco State University. And today's guest is Trey Wilson, the current play-by-play broadcaster for the Richmond Flying Squirrels, a AA affiliate of the San Francisco Giants. We discussed the differences between broadcasting basketball and baseball, how he got into the industry, favorite voices in the game, his own style, routine at the ballpark, advice to upcoming sports announcers, young players in the Giants system, so much more. Coming up next on RizzoCast. This is episode number 157, and let's get started. All right, and we are back with Trey Wilson, and Trey is nice enough to take some time and hop on the show. Trey, happy holidays. Thanks for coming on, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. Excited to chat some today.
Absolutely, and there's a lot going on in sports right now. I know you're a big basketball guy. We'll get into that in just a second with what you got going on in basketball. And there's baseball free agency, there's baseball trades. But more importantly, it is the Thanksgiving holiday. We're fresh off of it, a few days removed now. Christmas is coming up. We got to get kind of, your plans. How did they go for the Thanksgiving holiday? What was on your plate? Because I know that could be a very sacred topic for a lot of people. There's some controversial opinions when it comes to what people eat and all that. So how'd your holiday go? And what went down the stomach for Trey Wilson?
Yeah, I love getting to spend time with family that time of year, but especially eating. Anybody who follows me on social knows that I love food. So I went back home I saw my grandparents down near Smithfield, Virginia, which is just like an hour and a half east of where I live now, and spent some time with them. Of course, Smithfield is the ham capital of the world, so some Smithfield ham is always part of that. And funny enough, Giants broadcaster Dave Fleming has some Smithfield ham ties. I found that out this year when I was chatting with him in Cincinnati. And then I went down and saw my dad and that side of the family and had a good time. And then I had to motor back home because I had basketball broadcasts on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday after Thanksgiving. So it was a little bit of an abbreviated Thanksgiving compared to what it normally is, but it was so great. But yeah, my number one on the Thanksgiving plate is these ham biscuits from this place called Darden's Country Store right outside of Smithfield, Virginia. That is number one. It's turkey's great, but the ham, that salty Southern country Smithfield ham, really is my favorite part of that.
Yeah, you know what? You're not the only one that's kind of like going away from turkey these days. I think it's like more of a trend. More people are doing it, and it's kind of interesting. I'd like to see a detailed report if there's any statistics about how many people are moving away from turkey each year, because it seems like it's more every year.
Oh, we still had turkey. And
okay.
I had two different types. The grandparents one, it was more of a traditional cook, and then my dad fried a turkey this year. I think it was the second time he's tried that. So that was a different experience, but it's all great. I'm down with all the different types of meat.
Yeah, absolutely. And Christmas is coming up, so maybe the abbreviated, Thanksgiving leads more to a Christmas, New Year's holiday, a big one. And I guess we're also approaching gift season. And I know for me, I just got assigned a Secret Santa and I got to figure out what to do. How are you on gifts? Like, are you a guy that is really good at getting gifts early? Are you a last minute guy, like December 23rd, you're in the mall, you're trying to figure out what to do? Or do you give gifts at all? Because I don't judge here.
It's I'm so last minute with that. I try to put a lot of thought into the gifts that I give people. I want them to get something that they'll enjoy and or is practical. I like to receive practical gifts. I've got too much junk in my house as it is. So if you're going to give me something that I can put to use, my Secret Santa at the office a couple of years ago, remember they have the lists now that you can do in a lot of the apps, and I put on like, I need some butt splice connectors and some crimping tools so I can rewire the speakers in my truck, and that's what I got. So maybe a little bit boring, but I'm all about practicality.
Yeah, when I used to put on like books and stuff on my list, and my family would be like, "What are you doing? Like, pick something fun." And it's like I have everything. Like I don't need anything. But one of these,
Socks, man. I need socks.
socks. Yeah,
It's the joke that's the worst thing to get, but it's hard. It's hard to
yeah.
keep track of socks.
It's funny. Last year, I went with the gag gifts, and I got my dad a button that he could put where he eats, and he could click the button. It goes, "That's bullshit." And then I have I gave my brother a Bob Ross Chia Pet. So I think I did very well on Christmas last year.
I've got a little bit of a gag gift in store. There's going to be also a practical gift attached to it, but for the person in our front office, Secret Santa. I don't want to say it yet because we've got a couple weeks till that goes out. But I've got a little one that I hope goes over well at the office Christmas party.
Yeah, they might be listening. We don't want to give too much away. But it'd be funny if one year for Christmas, I'm just going to say, you know what you're going to get from me? My presents. Yeah, I'd probably get disowned. Anyways, speaking of gift giving, you're constantly given a pretty awesome gift, right? Of one of them is this time of year being calling some Longwood University basketball games, right? And we're going to dive into baseball in just a second, but I want to see how basketball has given you kind of that balance this time during the off season, because a lot of minor league baseball announcers have to kind of take on that second gig. And for you, I'm sure it's a lot of fun to kind of embark on a different type of atmosphere during the winter. So tell me about that balance. And is that a difficult transition going from baseball, like for a lot of months during the year, to basketball at this time?
Not really at all. It is a lot different, but there's also that gap, that October and the first part of November gap where everything is kind of slowed down. I don't have to do it. I'm fortunate enough to be a full-time employee with the organization that I work with. I actually, it's nice these days in my career, I get to be selective. So there are some other opportunities that come up that I say, I would love to, but I need some time to just relax. I don't do college football anymore because I need the fall, especially now the minor league season goes a little further in the calendar than it used to, further into September. I need some downtime. So college basketball for me, it's perfect. I do something between 15 and 20 games a year, mostly on ESPN Plus, along with Longwood University. I do a few other ones mixed in here and there. And some occasional radio, but with baseball, with our structure here, being the communications person, all this, like there's 1,000 things going on each day, and then you're rushing around. You sit down, and it's game time. The basketball one's nice because I'll do some prep in the days leading in. I'll watch a little film and do some notes, and then I basically just show up and call the game. And I feel when I first started doing that, it was a little unnerving. It's like, man, I feel like I'm missing something, but I've started to grow kind of to enjoy it where I just sit down, I have a conversation with the director and some of the people in the control room, and then chat up with my broadcast partner, and then we just go. It's actually kind of nice, and I really love college basketball. Behind baseball, it's definitely my second favorite thing to call.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And the differences between the two sports are pretty drastic, right? Baseball's a little bit more slow moving, maybe not, as slow moving as it once was a few years ago. But it's kind of, slower moving than basketball, at least. Basketball, I mean, you're constantly moving your head like this, and there's a lot going on. What are the main differences that you've noticed between calling the two sports?
Yeah, baseball is obviously a much slower pace. There's a lot more conversational broadcast, and there's a lot more. It's every day too, so there are storylines that are playing out that change all the time, and you're trying to. I'm big on trying to make sure that everything is contextualized and not just throwing numbers out there. And baseball gives you plenty of time to do that. Basketball differs between whether I'm doing radio or doing television. I did radio for 3 games this past weekend, and there's not much time for any fill. You're pretty much calling the action, and then when there are breaks, I'm letting the guy that I'm working with, letting him provide the color there. And so it's a lot less conversational. But TV for basketball, obviously, people can see what's happening. You don't have to call every single play. So it's a little bit more story time when you're doing TV, which is what I do most of the time. Most of the games that I do are TV broadcasts on ESPN Plus, and so that's a little bit more. I lean on the guy that I'm working with, let him be entertaining, and I get to kind of play the bring things back to the ground guy, just making sure that the broadcast doesn't get off the rails too much.
Yeah, no doubt. And I love how I was on your website, Trey, and I love how your website, when you go under the volleyball and football clips, it says they're old now and Trey's a better broadcaster.
Yeah, I took those down. I haven't done football in a while, and the tapes didn't really accurately reflect how I am as a broadcaster these days. I think I used to have stuff up there because I did a lot of those, but now I don't actually need to update all of it because it's pretty out of date. But the other thing is that that's a resume website, and I'm not really out here looking for jobs right now. I'm pretty content with the ones that I have. So I'm very grateful to be in that fortunate position.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're selective now, and that makes me feel good because you're selective and you want to hop on this podcast. So shout out to you. And but I do imagine if given the chance to maybe do some volleyball or football, would you jump at that? Would that be something you'd be interested in?
So, man, so it's a little behind the scenes, but I will basically I'm open to doing it, but it's got to be it's I'm really picky with it. I haven't done either in a while, because both of those sports are played in the fall, the college
Yep.
level. Volleyball is during the fall, and of course football is in the fall, and that's coming on the heels of 140 plus baseball broadcasts plus um, all the other work that goes into baseball season. So I really need that time to kind of catch up on life and go see family, travel some. So it's pretty unlikely that I'm gonna say yes unless it's just something that's like a too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I'm very lucky to be in a position where I can be selective like that. Never would have thought that 10 or 12 years ago when I decided. It's funny. I was prepping for. I have a broadcast tonight. I have a basketball game tonight, and one of the teams that's in it, I haven't called one of their games in over a decade. And I was thinking back to the last time I called one of their games, and it was right around the time that I had decided, because before broadcasting was just something that I kind of did because I enjoyed it. I had a different idea for a career path, but that was right around the time that I decided, okay, this is something that I really want to do. And it's just funny looking back over the last decade and thinking about that kid and thinking about the things that I've gotten to do since then. And he never would have imagined. Even, it might not seem like much to some, but getting to be the voice of the Richmond Flying Squirrels, which I think is the flagship baseball program in my home state. In the game of baseball, you don't really get to pick where you go. And to get a chance to be close to home and to be here is something that I never would have imagined a decade ago. So I'm very grateful for it.
Absolutely. And let's get into kind of your career a little bit. You're a Virginia guy. You've been around you've been around the country a little bit. Tell me about kind of your baseball upbringing and how did you kind of develop that passion for the game as a youngster? When did it start for you? Because I know everybody's kind of got their story about how it develops. How did it start for you?
Yeah, I'm in my early 30s, so I grew up in the 90s, and I grew up in a military family who moved around quite a bit, mostly around the southeast. So my favorite team growing up was the Atlanta Braves, and of course, right during their heyday. So I was a Braves fan growing up. They were the most accessible team, whether we were living in Virginia or North Carolina, or the little bit of time that we spent living in Georgia. Of course, they were right there. But also it was mostly from playing. Growing up mostly in areas that didn't have a major league team close, I barely went to any major league games in person as a kid. So my love for baseball was from starting with t-ball, playing t-ball, and growing up, collecting baseball cards as a kid and things like that. That was what brought me closer to the game, and going to minor league games, whether it was in Norfolk, Virginia, with the Tides, or Kinston, North Carolina, when we were down there. That was my chance to get to see professional athletes up close. It wasn't going to major league games like a lot of people in bigger markets might be. I think outside of one summer in Atlanta where I got to go to a bunch of Braves games when we lived down there, I think I went to 2 major league baseball games before I was an adult. And then when I got that freedom, I started going to as many as I could, traveling long distances to do that. But I just loved playing it. It was my favorite sport to play, and tried to follow that on through into college. Didn't quite work out the way that I had hoped, but it did open some doors for me to get to stay in the game. And here I am now, still around it. And it's truly something again, talking a minute ago about 10 years ago, looking back to like 8-year-old me, if I told him then that I'd get to do what I do now, I think that he'd probably start doing cartwheels, and I've never done a cartwheel in my life. So
I'm gonna follow up on that. So tried to play in college, right? What position did you play? We got to get a full scouting report. You could make a minor league guy. You could even mix in the 20 to 80 scale on this one if you want the scouting scale. We got to get a scouting report. What did you have in your arsenal? What was kind of in your toolbox as a baseball player?
I mean, saying really anything at all would be overselling it. I've tried. I was mostly a pitcher. I'm 6'5", so that was kind of where I got pigeonholed at a certain point. And but growing up, I loved other sports too, so I didn't do like a lot of guys do, where you focus in on one sport. I played basketball throughout high school, played volleyball in high school, played a little football and soccer as a kid. But yeah, I went to a school called Bluefield College, now called Bluefield University. They have a really good baseball program, and I had some conversations with the school about trying to play. I had been hurt my senior year of high school. So I went out, worked out with the team during the fall of my freshman year. Just basically, I wasn't going to be able to get healthy enough, and I really was also like, I really had a bad attitude back then. I was a little bit of a head case, and I got into my own head a little bit, kind of called it quits earlier than I probably should have, just because I was so frustrated about not being able to get healthy. Had some shoulder issues. It sounds a little bit like an Uncle Rico story, like, I could throw the football over that mountain. I really wasn't that good, especially, working around professional baseball players now and seeing how focused and how hard they worked growing up. I didn't have any of that. So I was playing in bands and running around, hanging out with friends and working a couple of jobs and things like that. I didn't have nearly the investment or the focus that it takes to be a successful athlete, even at the collegiate level. I don't think a lot of people understand how hard that is. So I didn't really follow through on a lot of the stuff that I didn't really get that work ethic and drive until a little bit later. And I'm okay with how it all turned out. It's not like I was ever going to play in the big leagues or anything like that. So this has been a much cooler opportunity.
And I guess if you were to do it again, you would have like the Rapsodo starting at like 8 years old, and pitch, what is it called? Trackman at 8 years old, and everything's so different now. And you mentioned the other jobs, and I did read about, how you were stocking shelves at K-Mart before kind of the broadcasting stuff took off. And this is a good message, I think, for a lot of young people in media, where we're seeing the media landscape change. We just saw that story about Sports Illustrated and the AI authors and everything, which is crazy to me. But how often did you feel directionless with kind of, I don't want to get too deep here, but like with kind of your career aspirations? Because I know everybody has like a dream of what they want to do, but you got to work at it. And sometimes it could leave you kind of feeling directionless. Did you ever have that feeling of like, God, what am I going to do next?
Yeah. So every day was really just trying to figure out how to get through that day. I was never, for a long time, there was never really like thoughts about where I was going. I went to college to study marketing initially, and then I was asked to leave, and I went back home and I worked retail jobs. I was working at K-Mart, which you mentioned, which was awful. Definitely the worst job I ever had. I was unloading trucks and stocking shelves in the humid Virginia Beach summer heat, and ended up getting a different job. I moved over to work at a Sam's Club, and that was a little bit better. But that was when I really realized, man, I got to get my stuff together. So I went back out and moved back to my college town, tried to get in, was turned away the first time. I was working at an outreach center for kids. I was working at a restaurant, did a few other things. And then I did get back into school. And when I went back, I was a much better student that second run, had much more focus. And I ended up getting a job in the athletic department, switched my major over to journalism. I thought I was going to be a writer, but I quickly figured out where that industry was heading. This is around 2010 to 2012. So I started adding some other skills. I started doing a lot more like PR, behind the scenes stuff, graphic design, video work. I worked at a television station for a little while. But the big thing was I started getting into play-by-play. And even now, it probably only accounts for like 5% of what I actually do. It's definitely the most visible thing, and the thing that I kind of hang my hat on being known for. But even though it's a small percentage of what I do, so it really did take a while before I started to get opportunities, and that was just the thing that I kept getting opportunities in. So I just decided to follow that path.
Making me feel really good about my career as a print journalism major here, man. But
Well, it's just that it's just changed, like
yeah,
you're not
I
going
get
to
it.
like, I knew I wasn't going to be writing for a daily newspaper, most likely, in some of these small markets. There are definitely now things have started to open up more through some digital avenues and things like that. So there's stuff out there.
And it's funny you said you do PR, and in journalism, like we always talk about how PR is kind of like the dark side, right? When a journalist goes to PR, it's like, oh, you're moving to the dark side. And from what I've come in contact with, there's usually, if a PR person's really good, they're really good, right? If they're really bad, they're really bad. There's no in between, right? With helping journalists and everything. Do you? This is kind of a fun question. Do you see kind of like a not a rivalry, because the two have to work together at some capacity, but do you kind of like see, sometimes if you're not able to accommodate a journalist or a reporter, there's kind of like that dismay, the annoyance that comes with being a PR person?
Yeah, for sure. Especially coming at it from a journalistic background. I was a journalism major. I've written for newspapers. I've written for online outlets. I definitely understand that side of it and have a lot of love and appreciation for journalism. Also, my role is kind of weird because it's a little bit of a journalistic role, and I'm also in charge of our PR, where I'm the play-by-play guy, and I'm writing written content for stuff that we do, and I try to approach all of that with a journalistic mind. My boss here also is he worked for newspapers. He's an old minor league baseball broadcaster too, but he's been a copy editor and he's been a writer. So we have some journalistic things in mind, but at a certain point as well, there's some controlling the message and managing the brand that goes into it. So there are certain times that we may not be accommodating. We always try to be, though. The Flying Squirrels always have had good relationships with journalistic integrity still in mind, with the media outlets here locally. And so yeah, there's definitely some times where I'm like, yeah, I wish I could get more, but that's just not how it works.
Yeah, from what I've heard, you guys are great. So to carry that with some pride there. And is there anyone, and this is going back to broadcasting real quick, is there anybody in broadcasting that you listen to quite a bit, either way back when or now, maybe on the way home from something? Who are the broadcasters in sports? And I'll kind of open this up to sports that maybe you don't model yourself after. I know some people try and take one thing or two things from each person, but who are the guys or gals around the league, that around baseball, around basketball, that you kind of like to listen to and take things from possibly?
Yeah, growing up, we didn't have cable, so I listened to sports on the radio a lot, and I read the newspaper a lot. So a lot of newspaper writers that I really idolize as well. But some of my favorites in the broadcast world were Bill Roth from Virginia Tech, who's been there mostly since before I was born. He was gone for a few years. He was one of my favorites growing up. As I mentioned, I grew up following the Atlanta Braves, so they had some great broadcasters during that era, like Pete Van Wieren a lot. Later down the road, Jim Powell, I thought, was just outstanding. Him and Don Sutton together on Braves broadcasts. There's some broadcasters that, since I've gotten into the industry, have been very good to me. Joe Block with the Pittsburgh Pirates, especially from my time in Altoona, but even knowing him a little bit before he came to the Pirates when he was with the Brewers. He's been extremely helpful for my career. And I always loved the Giants broadcasters. And now getting a chance to be in Richmond, obviously, I have a little bit more reason to pay more attention to the Giants. So I love that they're on the West Coast and we're on the East Coast. So like when I'm driving home after a home game, I pull up KMBR on the MLB app, and listen to John Miller and Dave Fleming, and those two guys both are just incredible broadcasters. I know that it's out in San Francisco. It's just kind of, it might be a little taken for granted, but on a national landscape, they're so good. And obviously, I grew up watching John Miller on Sunday Night Baseball at ESPN as well, and I think that he's outstanding. And this summer, I got to spend a few minutes with both of those guys, with John Miller and with Dave Fleming, and chat with them a little bit, which was pretty cool. I've crossed paths with both of them a couple of times, but we a lot of people, you might fanboy a little bit over your favorite players or something like that. That doesn't move the needle much for me. But to being around great writers and great broadcasters, that's where I have to kind of check myself and make sure I'm not acting like a little kid.
Yeah, Dave is from kind of your neck of the woods, right? A Virginia guy, and I know his brother is with the Red Sox, doing Red Sox games on TV and radio, which is very cool. So maybe the next Dave Fleming, Trey Wilson. So put that in the listeners out
Not
there.
a not a chance.
Thank
He's
you.
on a different level.
Yeah.
He's on a different planet.
Thank you, John. Yeah, he's fantastic. He's really good. And um, just kind of getting into your routine a little bit at the ballpark. So when you get to the ballpark to when you return home, what would be kind of your daily routine for like an average normal? I guess there's no such thing as normal in a day to day of a minor league broadcaster, but a normal as it could get, Richmond Flying Squirrels game. What are you doing from start to finish when you get there?
Yeah, and it's changed over the years as I've gone through different organizations to where now I have less specific tasks on my plate than I used to because I have a bigger staff. I have a great staff that works here with me, running the social and helping with the baseball information and the marketing and all that other stuff that kind of falls under my department. But every day is different. But the things that we're going to do pretty much every day. My assistant Blaine helps me out with basically all these tasks. He's my right hand man, and we've got to get together these notes and stats for both the coaching staffs. That's usually one of the first things we want to make sure those are there when they get here. So we get those packets together. Blaine usually does that every day and gets them over to the coaches. There are some days where I'll do it. And we put together the game notes that are distributed to the media. That's also our broadcast prep. So we do this like 10-page game notes packet every day that updates what's going on with all the players, different storylines and things like that. That usually takes a pretty good chunk of the middle of the day. Then there are always a bunch of other various tasks. But if we're at home, doing a lot of that stuff here and then making our way up to the broadcast booth, probably I usually get up there. Well, some days I might get up there an hour before first pitch. Some days I might get up there 30 seconds before first pitch. I'm sitting down and we're going. So it really does vary from day to day. If we're on the road, it's a lot easier. Kind of work at my own pace, try to catch the bus over to the ballpark in the mid-afternoon, but I'll just do most of the work from the hotel. Try to venture out and see the towns that we're in, get out and do some exploration, find some good local food. But I'm doing most of the work kind of at the hotel, and then I'll take the bus over and about maybe if it's a 7:00 game, probably at like 2 or 3 o'clock. Try to catch a player, grab a player for a pregame interview, put together a new podcast episode or something like that because we repurpose a lot of our radio interviews for the podcast, and then call the game, and then after the game we've got to update the website, get the post game story up, and usually what I work a lot better at night. So a lot of times I'll actually stay up late until like 2 or 3 in the morning, sometimes later, doing most of the work for the next day, and then just try to ease into the day and get a later start than most people out there in the world because I've got to hit my peak energy every day at 7, not at like, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I've kind of shifted my work schedule around a little bit to match that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it sounds like the definition of a grind. And I know the minor leagues have been described as that for quite some time. And while you're not playing, there is kind of a sense where you're on, you kind of overlap with the same schedule as the players, being that you're both playing. You're not playing, but you guys are both kind of taking part in some capacity in the game. How do you deal with that grind as a broadcaster? Do you ever get, and I'm sure you do get tired, but how do you deal with the exhaustion at times? Because I'm sure that's what a lot of people would want to know.
Yeah, it's load management, kind of like you talk about with pitchers, right? I'm also very fortunate to work for an organization that really values self-care as much as you can in season in baseball. So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability to kind of do things on my own schedule and work at my own pace as much as is allowed for with the demands of the job. It used to be like before I came to Richmond, I worked in Altoona, smaller staff, smaller market, a lot more daily tasks on my plate than there are now. And I don't know how many hours a week I was working then, but typically I'd get into the ballpark around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was leaving at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was going home and taking a nap and coming back if we were at home. It's a lot different now, thankfully, but I actually use an app now that tracks my work hours just for my own just to try to make sure that I'm not doing too many hours. I'm on a fixed salary, so it's not like I'm getting paid by the hour, but there are some weeks during the season. My typical week, I'm probably actually working in season between 60 and 75 hours is my sweet spot. If I can get into that area, I'm probably not going to overload myself too much. But there are some weeks, I was going back through it earlier this week, in fact, looking back at my logs through the season, there's some weeks where I'm getting up to about like 90 to 95 hours in a week. And that's when things start to really, I say, okay, I'm not managing my time well. I've got to figure out a different way to do this, or I'm going to burn myself out. Seasons when I was first doing this, by June, I was a zombie. Now I've done a lot better job of managing some of that workload and getting more efficient with my time and not wasting as much time, and getting more selective with some of the things that I'm doing to make sure that I'm not burning myself out. March is always going to be an outlier, though, leading up to the season, because there's so many things that have to be done in that run up to opening day. So there's that. Those last couple of weeks of March are pretty much a guarantee that I'm going to cross over that 90-hour mark, and that's frustrating because you're going right into the start of the season already tired. So that's one that this year I'm going to try to figure out how to manage better and see if I can wrangle in a little bit and get that back into that 60 to 75 hour sweet spot.
Yeah, maybe you could come on, you could update and tell us how you did. But are you able to keep up with, because the minor league baseball, like, I'm sure if you work in it, there's a little bit of like a circle that you're in, and you're, inside of it, and there's Major League Baseball happening. And are you able to kind of keep up with what's going around Major League Baseball, or is that something that you're kind of tuned out of during the course of a minor league season? I know you mentioned you listen to John and Dave, of course, on the way home, KMBR after a game, but are you able to kind of keep up with the big storylines across the league?
Yeah, for the most part. The bus rides and stuff, there's some time to scroll Twitter and stuff like that. But during the season, I'm mostly focused on the Giants, since they're a parent club and they have a lot of our former players, and I'm, interested. I want them to do well. I want those former players to do well. I want the Giants to do well because they're so good to me. I want them to be able to. The Giants organization's been great to me since I came over here, so I want to see them do well. With the national storylines, I'll fall a little bit behind on. It's really funny because I'll go to a social function of some sort, and somebody will be, they know I work in sports, so they're like, hey, how about this storyline? They'll mention some big thing, and I say, yeah, I don't really know much about it. You know more than I do. The general fan is going to know more than I am on a lot of those types of things. And then when the playoffs come around after our season ends, I'll usually watch a lot of those playoff games. A lot of the times it'll be on the background while I'm doing other work, but I'll lock in a little bit during the playoffs. I also love baseball history, so I like to watch old baseball documentaries. I will watch through Ken Burns baseball at least once a year, all the way through, usually during the spring. And so I like the history of the game, and to keep up with the history of the game, you have to know what's happening today. So I try to make a point to so you can contextualize all those different things. So I try to make a point to follow, but it is difficult in the season because I'm very focused on what's happening with the 28 guys in our clubhouse here in Richmond.
And I could already imagine the people coming up to you and asking, like, Slater's dealt with the hamstring stuff. Do you think he's going to be in the lineup tonight for the Giants in Cincinnati, Trey? And you're just going to go, that's not me, man. That's not my, he might be. And also, I like how you brought up the Ken Burns documentary, because I'm right there with you. That's a must every single winter. And I'm looking forward for you to report back on hearing about Mordecai Brown, Three Finger Brown's off-speed pitches. So love to hear that. And in minor league broadcasting, the one thing that I've heard, and I think I heard this, and I'm sure you're very familiar with Roger Munter. He's great, and his coverage with the Giants minor league system. And I can't remember who he was talking to. It might have been Joe Rizzo from San Jose, and he was talking about how the players' families are sometimes your biggest fans, some of your biggest fans on the broadcast. Because, if they have, an interest in listening, and I'm sure there's a lot of Richmond Flying Squirrels fans that listen regardless, but do you ever get the noise from the players' families about, listening and kind of being big fans of your work? Because they have a lot of reason to listen if they have somebody closely tied with the organization. So what is that kind of relationship with the players' families? Are you aware that, that might be the case?
Oh yeah, it's always in my mind. I'm never one to rip people anyway, but I'm going to be conscious of this is a development level. If a
Yeah.
guy's in a slump, I'm going to contextualize it. Usually, I'm not going to, overly sugarcoat. But if a guy's playing poorly and it needs to come up in the broadcast, we're going to talk about some things he's done well. But we used to have a lot more crossover with the families before MILB TV expanded so much,
It's
because the
huge.
radio broadcast was usually they were listening to us the full season instead of just half the season when we're at home. Now a lot of times they're just watching when we're on the road, they're watching the other team's broadcast because it's their broadcast. It's on MILB TV. There are some parents, and I love these are my favorite parents, who will pause the MILB TV broadcast and pull up the stream of our radio broadcast and sync them up. Uh, there are a handful of players' families who've done that, but yeah, over the years you do get to know the players' families. Some players more than others, especially when they come to town, and you get to spend a little bit of time with them here at the ballpark after a game or something like that. You get to meet them, and that's they're just as in it as the players are. They're part of the journey right from childhood on, and that's one of my favorite things is getting to watch guys go on to make their big league debut. I love that first game in the major leagues when they show the shots of the families sitting in the crowd and just knowing, that they've been, firing tweets at us or liking every tweet about their kid or something like that. Or, they've just been along for that journey. It's just as big of a day for them as it is for that player. And I love that the broadcasts in the big leagues always give almost always give a shot of the families watching, because I know that it's a big moment for them. And we do build some relationships with those families when those guys are coming up.
Yeah, they're all over social media. Like I remember Tyler Beatty's dad was all over social media. Logan Webb's dad is all over social media. They keep tabs on what people say and what people write about their sons for sure. And
But we still have to be honest.
yeah,
Like we
absolutely.
can't. That's it.
Yep.
So going back to the PR versus journalism, I still view it journalistically. I can't lie. I can't. The sugarcoating has to be kept in check.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I brought up Beatty's dad. I'm blocked by him. So if that gives you any indication, Walter, unblock me. But yeah, no, yeah, definitely got to be fair as well. And one thing I do want to ask is, because everybody's kind of got their early career, growing pains. This is going to be very blatant, but what's your worst like mess up? Like, what's the one time you could think of in your career where you're just like, and it can't even be one time. It could be, any time or series of times where maybe a name, maybe a factual mistake. Like, what is the one time where just like you screwed up somehow on the air or in print or whatever capacity?
I got hot mic'd a couple of different times. The mic is always hot, so you got to be careful what you say. Somebody didn't turn a level down, and I made a comment. There were a couple of them. I made a comment one time about a pitcher. This has been years ago. This was before I was in Richmond, when we were at break, and it went out over the broadcast, but it also went out over the feed and in the clubhouse where the pitching coach was, and out into the suites and stuff like that. And it wasn't anything super egregious. It was more of just, it was actually kind of supportive, but the guy had a really bad outing. I can't remember what the exact phrase that I said was. Again, it wasn't egregious. It wasn't like hateful or anything like that. It was more of like expressing frustration for him because he was really struggling, and I knew that he was feeling it too, and it was hurting the team. So the pitching coach grabbed me right after the game and lit me up, and he really let me have it for like 5 straight minutes. And then we break the conversation. He turns and looks at me and goes, "We were all thinking the same thing." Like, yeah. So that one was definitely a learning moment early in my career. On the air, actually, during the broadcast, I think that the first one that pops into mind is I was in Altoona, and our broadcast booth there is really high up. It's a beautiful ballpark, one of my favorite ballparks in minor league baseball. We have a great broadcast angle, but every now and then we'd get some wildlife flying around in the booth, and we had this massive bug that flew into the booth and was like flying around, and like my partner, the guy that I was working with that season, it like landed on him, and he's freaking out. So I'm distracted, and a guy hits a fly ball to center field, and I don't follow the play all the way through because I'm distracted. I see the center fielder looks like he's camped and he's about to make the catch. So I looked away, called that he made the catch, said that the inning ended, wrapped, and went to send it to break. But in reality, while I was distracted by this bug, the ball got behind the center fielder, and the guy ended up getting a triple, scored 2 runs, and the inning kept going. And that one was pretty embarrassing. It wasn't really it wasn't like a massive consequence to that. It was not something that I really kicked myself about. It was just a learning moment of, oh yeah, even when there are like, I remember saying that there's like a pterodactyl flying around the booth. It was like in my face. You got to find a way to lock it and make sure you follow through, and don't just make an assumption that a guy's going to make the catch. See the ball get in the glove, see the guys running off the field. That was one that was a little bit of a learning moment early in my career.
Yeah, I would be more scared of the pterodactyl. I think baseball would be secondary at that point. But that leads me into this. Like, I mean, I guess you can mess up in the minor leagues, right? If you're gonna make your mistakes, it's good to do them early in your career and kind of get those out of the way. And again, for those many broadcast people with broadcast aspirations that might be listening, do you have one piece of advice to A, get over those fears, and B, I guess maybe who did that come from? Like where was the best piece of advice that you've gotten from a journalism standpoint, or from a podcasting standpoint, I should say?
I've gotten so much, it'd be hard to really pin it on one person or one set of advice, but really just get the reps, and keep trying to get better. People ask me all the time, like, don't you want to be in the big leagues? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. If somebody called and said, we're going to offer you this job, I'd certainly consider it. I'm not going to just say no. But I'm really happy where I am. And in broadcasting, I think that that's not the norm. If you're not even people who are in big jobs, a lot of people are really focused on that next opportunity. I follow that old mantra it's in a lot of places, but it's definitely common in baseball: be where your feet are. But at the same time, even though I'm very content with the job that I have now, and if I spend the next 40 years here, I'll be thrilled, I'm always trying to get better. And try not to be too hard on myself, especially somebody who didn't go to a broadcast school, doesn't have the pedigree that a lot of the people that are in this industry have. I have to remind myself sometimes that, hey man, you're here, you've been able to get this opportunity, so clearly somebody believes that you can handle that. And remind myself of that, and be able to accept criticism, constructive criticism. Be able to let people with experience listen to your tapes, let your peers, the people that are working alongside you, listen to your tapes and go through and point some things out, because there's only so much that you're going to be able to find of yourself. And don't take it too personally. Just there's always room for improvement. So constantly throughout the year, I'm always trying to do things better, trying to find things that I'm struggling in, and find ways to do those things better. As a broadcaster, one of my areas of weakness, I think, is that I don't do the big call as well as a lot of people do, like the big moment, the walk-off home run and stuff like that. And it's in my personality. I'm not as excitable as some people, I guess. I think I can fill the game very well, storytelling and things like that. But the bigger moments. So I'm still all these years into my career trying to figure out, without being inauthentic. That's my big thing, is I don't want to be inauthentic. I'm not going to start jumping up and screaming over a 6th inning 2-run double or something like that. But trying to give the moment the weight that it deserves. Trying to appropriately do that. That's something that's kind of been a focal point for me over the last year or so.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Always important to be yourself and not try to be anybody you're not. So that's good advice for young people out there. And I can't let you go without asking like actual baseball stuff with what's happening. And the Giants are kind of in the pressured filled spot in free agency. There's a lot of discussion surrounding trades and what they need to do, and if they need to dig into their minor league talent to make those trades. And you're familiar with a few of those guys. Is there anybody down there right now in the Giants system right now that has caught your attention, that you're excited about, and that could be a pretty big impact player at the big league level that either people are talking about or people aren't talking about? Who has caught your eye that has gone through Richmond?
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes it's the guy that you expect, it's the big touted prospect, and sometimes it's somebody that maybe wasn't as much on the radar. I love like the Ryan Walker story.
Yeah.
Ryan Walker had a great 2023 season in the big leagues, and he was never a guy that got a ton of attention here. I love seeing guys like that get to the major leagues and have success. And even just recently, the Giants have had such a surge in talent in the minor leagues, and we've seen that play out in the big leagues. Patrick Bailey started the season here with us in Richmond and had a great year in the major leagues. And I think that he's got still a lot of potential to be tapped into. Casey Schmidt, I know that he had some struggles, but he also showed a lot of what he can do, and we got to see that on display here. Obviously, the talk with the Giants minor leagues has been that they've got some really solid pitching in the upper levels of the minor leagues, and we got to see that this year. I love seeing guys who make mid-season adjustments. I think that like Ryan Murphy was a great example this past year. He really struggled in the first half, and then a lot of things clicked in the second half. Carson Seymour is another one who, although his numbers were pretty good all year, he's one of the guys the Giants got in the trade that sent Darren Ruff to the Mets. But Carson Seymour doubled his strikeout rate in the second half, making those adjustments. And he's a guy that I think that is going to start creeping up higher on people's radars. Landon Roop is another one on the pitching side that we didn't get to see him much this year. He missed most of the year with an injury, but when he's out there, he's so good. He's dominating, and he's a really fun pitcher to watch. I'd hate to leave some people out because there's so many other talented players that we've had here, but the pitching for sure has been really fun to watch over the last couple of years. Wade Meckler was a fun player to watch in the time that he was with us earlier this year. Another great story of a kid that was like 4'10", 75 pounds going into high school, overlooked for years, and then he gets to the minor leagues and just rockets right through because of, just on kind of grit and work ethic and things like that. There's so many different stories. I think the Giants are in a pretty good spot as far as the talent that they've got coming through the system. There's so many people that I think that are on that, so many players that are on that verge of like maybe they're not getting talked about as much, but they're right there. You can see the potential that they have to be major league contributors, and it's been fun over especially these last two seasons. There haven't been a ton of players who've come through Richmond over the years that have gone on to a lot of major league success, and I think that we've seen in these last few years with this regime, I think that we've seen a bit of a surge in minor league talent, and it's been fun for us selfishly here, regardless of what they go and do in the major leagues. And I hope everybody that plays here has a decade plus successful career in the major leagues, but it's been fun for us winning more games and being in the playoffs back-to-back years in Richmond. That's made things a lot more enjoyable. It's if you have a season where you win 50, 60 games, finish well under 500, there's still a lot of fun in that, but winning's more fun. And the byproduct of the Giants having more success in scouting and drafting and player development is that the teams have also played better in the minor leagues, and locally here in Richmond that plays well.
Yeah, it causes a ripple effect throughout the organization, and the Giants are going to continue to count on a lot of those young guys. You mentioned Bailey, you mentioned Walker, you mentioned Schmidt. Luciano's been pretty much been verbally given the shortstop job or given a chance to compete for the shortstop job, and he's expected to be the front runner if they don't add anybody this offseason. So he's somebody that you've seen a little bit of, but I always think it's cool that the minor league broadcasters kind of get to see the start of a player's career. And then, there is kind of like, you have a part when they make their big league debut. It might not be a big part, but it's like, I seen that guy. And I think a lot of fans feel the same way when they go and watch a minor league game. And I remember I used to go to a lot of San Jose Giant games, and God, it might've been 2014 or 13. And, I would go, oh my, Tyler Rogers is in the big league, Slater and Kelby Tomlinson with the glasses. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of those guys made it up there. And it kind of makes the fan feel more involved. And I'm sure it makes the broadcaster feel more involved as well.
Yeah, it's the same for me growing up in minor league towns, watching guys like David Wright, who played in Norfolk coming up when they were still a Mets affiliate, and he was from there. And that was really cool. But yeah, people ask me all the time, who's your favorite baseball team? I'm like, well, I pull for the Giants, because I work so closely with some people in the organization and of course with our players, but I'm really pulling for the guys that I've gotten a chance to work alongside. You get to know these guys pretty well, and you spend a lot of time with them when they're coming up through the minor leagues. And there are players scattered all over the major leagues that I really enjoyed working around while they were here that are having success has been fun to watch. From before my Giants organization time, guys like Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows and Josh Bell, Key Brian Hayes and Brian Reynolds and guys like that from the Pirates, and then from back before that, the Blue Jays, like Noah Syndergaard. People forget he came up with the Blue Jays, and Joe Musgrove and some of the guys, Kevin Pillar, that were on some of those early teams that I had over there. It's fun to watch those guys. I will pull for those guys more than like specific teams. When it gets to the playoffs, I always check the rosters and say, all right, which team has the guys that I got a chance to have on some of my teams in the minor leagues, because I got to figure out who I'm going to pull for in each series. And usually it's going to be for those individual players. I want them to achieve success. Some of them I still talk to, most of them I don't. They go on. If we see each other, we'll catch up, but it's not like I'm texting them and saying, hey, good luck in the upcoming season, something like that. But quietly, internally, I still want to see all those guys have success for themselves. And also, like we talked about earlier, the families that you get to know a little bit when they're coming up.
Yeah, Syndergaard was involved in that R.A. Dickey trade to Toronto, where Dickey went to Toronto and Syndergaard went to the Mets. And Tyler Glasnow, a friend of the show, came on a few years ago. So he's an
entertaining guy.
He is an entertaining guy. I think he's got a post-baseball life, no doubt about it, somewhere in broadcasting. Maybe he could be your partner in Richmond.
Oh man, that would be. He, it's funny. Glasnow was one of those like guys who was a massive prospect when he got there, all the attention and pressure and everything. And it's so fun now to see him let loose a little bit, because I don't think he had that in him. He was entertaining. He could be a funny guy, but I don't know if like the pressure that's on some of these top prospects when they're coming up, especially these days now in the year 2023 with so much attention on prospects, it's got to be unreal. You don't really see it. You don't hear about, man, all this pressure. These guys are athletes and they're professionals going about their business, but it does seem like Glass has been able to let loose now that he's had some major league success down in Tampa and really show the great personality that he's got. I think that's great. And great personalities are something that we certainly need in baseball. It's other sports have done a great job of showcasing and marketing their players. And we need some players who have these great, fun personalities to help be ambassadors for the game. And he's a guy who can do that. And there are a ton of others who've come through Richmond over the last few years that I could say that for as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm going to drop a name right before we leave, who was on that 2015 Altoona Curve team, who was my pitching coach in high school. It's Tom Harlan. Does that name ring a bell?
Really?
Yes.
I haven't talked to Tom Harlan in forever. Tom Harlan.
I've had him on too. Yeah.
I'll have to find that episode. I guess I missed that one when you were promoting it, but he was. I was actually going back and watching. We did a Saturday Night Live night in Altoona, and Glasnow was one of the guys. They did a Californians. If anybody watches SNL, there's the Californians back during like the Fred Armisen, Kristen Wiig era. And Glasnow and Harlan were in that video because they're guys from California, and got to show off their acting chops. And then Tom Harlan did a Deep Thoughts segment.
Are you the man? Are you behind the scenes of Deep Thoughts with Tom Harlan?
So no, I was there. There were probably a few people. So actually, Mike Passanisi, who's now one of the PR guys for the Giants, was my boss in Altoona that first half of that year before he left for the Mets. So Mike Passanisi is actually in the Californians video because he's from California. So he's in that Californians video with Tyler Glasnow and Tom Harlan, and Colin Ballister was actually the other one. He had come back down from the big leagues, and he was a lot of fun to be around too. He's a fun personality. Tom Harlan, Tyler Glasnow, Colin Ballister, and Mike Passanisi. And then I don't remember who wrote I think the Deep Thoughts one came from our video production guy that we had back then. But yeah, Tom Harlan was great. He's another great personality. Even in the minor leagues, you need those great personalities. If guys don't go on to play in the big leagues, growing the game locally, Tom was a good man for that.
Yeah, legendary pitching coach, and so he also teaches anatomy at the high school too, and we would walk through the hallways and we would go. We would mimic the Deep Thoughts with Tom Harlan video, and we would go, whatever happened with the old time baseball nickname? He's like, I never played with a Skeeter or a Schoolboy. how do I become the oil can? Like it was really good content, and it's funny that you were semi part of that.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's been so long ago. I'd be curious if Tom had a hand in writing. I also did one of the SNL night videos for that one, and I remember I didn't write any of the script. I was just given the script, so I wonder if Tom had some editorial oversight
I'm
on
gonna tell him
his
to listen
roles
to
in
this.
that.
I'm telling him to listen to this. So
Yeah,
we still send each other stuff on Instagram all the time. He's good people.
that's one of my favorite teams. Tom was on one of my. He was a great personality on that
Josh
team, and I don't
Bell,
even.
right?
Yeah, Josh Bell, Stetson Alley was another big person. He was a big prospect coming up those days. Yeah, Tyler Glasnow, Chad Cool, Austin Meadows. There were a lot of really good players on that team who were really good dudes. It's one of my favorite teams that I've had was that 2015 Altoona team.
Yeah.
And
Jameson Tyone maybe a little bit
he was
before that.
before then. Yeah, he came back and rehabbed with us when he was working his way back when he had cancer. So I got a chance to have him around for a couple of days. He's another great guy. But yeah, Tom Harlan, there's a blast from the past. And again, he probably doesn't even remember who I am, but I definitely remember Tom well. He was a good dude. I'm sure he still is. He's still with us. But, you know,
good dude. Post mortem. Trey, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. This was a blast. I kept you for way too long, but I think it was helpful for a lot of people who want to get into broadcasting. And happy holidays. And again, man, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. And young broadcasters, yeah, reach out if you have any questions. Sometimes it takes me a little while to set the time aside, but I'm always happy to chat with people that are trying to do this.
And if you want any clips on volleyball and football, he is a better broadcaster now, folks. So those are not on there. But he could help with those too, I'm sure. And you guys could follow him on Twitter at Trey Wilson 757. Go check him out. Does a lot of good stuff on his Twitter account, including the food that he mentioned earlier. So be on the lookout for that. And be on the lookout for him calling basketball, Longwood University basketball. He does a good job with that. And that's where he's going after this later today. So pretty cool stuff. And you guys could check out the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RizzoCast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. And see you next time.